She closed her eyes and extended her hand, eagerly waiting to feel the smooth, cold touch of an engagement ring slip onto her finger. Instead, she was met with a sharp slap across her face. The grand ballroom, filled with 20,000 guests, fell into a stunned silence. The kind of silence that was heavy, almost suffocating, as if the very air had thickened with the weight of what had just happened. Above them, crystal chandeliers sparkled, their dazzling light reflecting off tear-streaked faces and clenched fists. The entire room was processing the cruelty of Ethan Hawke's words, which rang out through the ballroom's sophisticated sound system. He had spent millions organizing this elaborate spectacle, not to celebrate love, but to orchestrate humiliation and hate. But what Ethan didn't realize was that hatred in its raw form has a way of making its targets stronger, sparking a reaction that is unexpected and far more powerful than the hate itself. It began with a single voice, a deep contralto, rising from somewhere in the vast crowd. An elderly woman whose voice carried the first lines of the anthem, "Lift every voice and sing," her tone fragile at first, as if unsure of whether others would join her. But slowly, one by one, more voices picked up the melody. The sound grew stronger and filled the entire space, like a powerful wave crashing against the shore. The entire crowd was singing, united in defiance against the hate that had just been thrown at them. Aileen, still standing on the stage where she had moments ago expected a proposal, felt hot tears streaming down her cheeks. But they weren't tears of humiliation or sadness. No, they were tears of overwhelming emotion. The slap on her face stung, yes, but it was nothing compared to the surge of strength she felt coming from the people around her, from the community that had transformed a moment of cruelty into something bigger than any one person could control. Dr. Marcus Johnson, a respected neurosurgeon with a commanding presence, stood up from the crowd and began walking toward the stage. As he approached, all eyes in the room turned to him. Ethan, who had been sneering and gloating, suddenly found himself face to face with Dr. Johnson, who stood as a symbol of the dignity and strength of an entire community. "Mr. Benjamin," Dr. Johnson's voice rang out, calm and clear, yet filled with authority. "You spent millions of dollars organizing this event, not to celebrate love, but to humiliate us, to hurt us. You thought you could break us with your hatred. But that says more about your own poverty of spirit than it does about our worth." The crowd murmured in agreement, their voices rising in a collective response. People began to move, not in panic or fear, but in purpose. Those with medical training rushed to check on Aileen, while legal professionals formed huddles, already beginning to discuss civil rights violations and how to fight back. Tech-savvy attendees quickly made sure that every moment was being recorded from every angle. The people in that ballroom weren't going to let Ethan's cruelty go unnoticed. Sophia Ward, the woman Ethan had presented as his fiancée, stood frozen in shock. The mask she had helped him maintain shattered before her eyes. Her designer dress, which had once felt glamorous, now felt like a costume in a tragedy she no longer wanted to be part of. With trembling hands, she removed the diamond ring Ethan had given her and placed it on the stage floor. "I didn't know," she whispered into the microphone, her voice cracking with emotion. "I didn't know the extent of his hatred. I can't be part of this." She turned to Aileen, her eyes filled with genuine regret. "I'm so sorry." The crowd's response to Sophia's confession was not what Ethan had expected. There was no panic, no mass exodus, no chaos to fuel his twisted narrative of superiority. Instead, he watched in growing unease as the gathering began to transform into something entirely different. A community of people standing together, united against the hate that had been inflicted upon them. Instead of scattering in fear or embarrassment, the crowd began to organize. People moved with determination. Those who had medical knowledge tended to Aileen. Lawyers formed impromptu groups to discuss the legal ramifications of Ethan's actions. Young tech entrepreneurs offered their platforms to spread awareness. Local restaurant owners started organizing food distribution so people could stay and plan how to respond to the injustice they had witnessed. Ayesha Chen, a local news reporter who had been invited to cover the engagement, started live streaming everything, capturing the shocking events as they unfolded. Her professional composure cracked only once as she looked directly into the camera and said, "What we are witnessing tonight is not the story of one man's hate, but of a community's extraordinary resilience." The ballroom, once a place for luxury and celebration, was now something else entirely. The grand round tables, which had been set for a night of champagne and laughter, were now being used as command centers. People who had come expecting a night of frivolity were now passing around legal notepads and business cards. Smartphones lit up the room as determined faces made plans for action. Social media campaigns were born in real time, and the very infrastructure that Ethan had set up to showcase his hate was now being repurposed for justice. Dennis Foster, a retired judge who was in attendance, stood on a chair and called for attention. "What Mr. Benjamin has done here tonight constitutes a clear case of public discrimination and emotional distress. But more than that, he has provided us with irrefutable evidence and 20,000 witnesses," he said. A grim smile crossed his face. "In trying to showcase his hate, he has given us every tool we need to fight it." Ethan, who had been standing with a triumphant sneer just moments ago, began to feel a rising sense of uncertainty. This was not the chaos he had expected. There was no fear, no brokenness. Instead, he was watching, helpless, as his carefully orchestrated night of cruelty transformed into something entirely different, a catalyst for change. As the night wore on, the luxury venue that Ethan had chosen for his display of hatred became something more. It became the birthplace of a movement. The very walls that had been designed to witness humiliation and sorrow were now the setting for the first steps of a revolution in civil rights and human dignity. The $50 million Ethan had spent trying to crush a community's spirit had instead bought him a front row seat to its triumph. By the time the night ended, Ethan, once at the center of attention, was now increasingly isolated. He stood on the stage, watching as the carefully constructed world of privilege and prejudice that he had worked so hard to build began to crumble, piece by piece, as the crowd's unity and strength continued to grow. The next morning, when the sun rose over the city, everything had changed. The video of the night's events had gone viral. Ayesha Chen's live stream had only been the beginning. Soon, thousands of video clips from different angles flooded the internet. Each clip showed the same story, the cruelty of Ethan Hawke and the powerful response of a united community. The first clip to go viral was filmed by 16-year-old Maya Washington. She had attended the event with her parents and had captured the exact moment when Ethan's false charm turned into open hatred. The video showed his hateful speech, his sneer, and most importantly, the moment when he slapped Aileen. This video would become key evidence in the legal proceedings to come. Within hours, the story spread everywhere. Celebrities who had previously worked with Ethan began posting public apologies, expressing their shock and regret for ever being associated with him. Business leaders who had attended the party also began distancing themselves from him, with some posting long statements about their commitment to change. The videos from the night showed everything. The elderly woman who started singing, Dr. Johnson's powerful speech, Sophia's public renouncement of Ethan, and most importantly, the incredible strength of the community. Rather than seeing Aileen as a victim, people saw her as someone who held her dignity and strength in the face of cruelty. The footage of the crowd rallying around her became a symbol of resilience. As the day went on, more and more people shared their own stories of discrimination, using the hashtag #JusticeForAileen. The videos gained momentum with each new share. And soon, the story wasn't just about Ethan's hate. It was about the power of unity, the strength of the community, and the incredible capacity of people to stand together and demand change. Social media, which had often been criticized for spreading hate, had now become a platform for justice. People used it to organize peaceful protests, fundraisers, and support groups. In just a few short hours, the world had witnessed something incredible. The community's response to hate had not only exposed Ethan for who he truly was, but it had also inspired a global movement for change. By the evening, Ethan tried to control the narrative, releasing a carefully worded apology. But it was too late. His apology couldn't undo the damage his hate had caused. It couldn't erase the evidence that had already been seen by millions of people. His carefully planned scheme had failed in ways he couldn't have predicted. What Ethan hadn't understood was the power of the digital age in trying to control the story. The camera doesn't just capture images, it captures the truth. What happened in that room wasn't just recorded as evidence, it became much more. The video became a powerful tool for teaching. Teachers from all over the country asked for copies to show in classrooms. Business trainers used it in diversity training programs, and organizations fighting for civil rights archived it, knowing how important it was. By the end of that first day, the video had been viewed by millions, but more importantly, it sparked countless conversations, inspired action, and helped start a movement for change. Ethan thought he was creating a moment of hate, but in reality, he had created something far more powerful. What he thought would be a spectacle of cruelty turned into an undeniable record of love triumphing over hate, dignity rising above degradation, and community overcoming cruelty. The world was watching, and for once, the viral spread of content was not just a passing trend. It was serving the cause of justice. The videos had indeed changed everything, but not in the way Ethan intended. Instead of spreading hate, the footage became a digital testament to the truth that love would always shine through the darkness, and that in the end, love is always stronger than hate. Aileen Warros, the woman at the center of it all, spent 3 days in deep thought after the incident. For 3 days, she sat quietly in her modest apartment, watching as the world reacted to Ethan's cruel actions. Her phone buzzed constantly with interview requests, messages of support, and offers from publishers. Despite the overwhelming attention, Aileen knew that when she finally spoke, it had to be more than just a response to hatred. It needed to be something bigger. It needed to inspire change. On the 4th day, she sat up straight, adjusted her camera, and began recording what would become known as her Voice of Change speech. "My name is Aileen Warros," she began, her voice calm and steady. "I'm not here to tell you a story of victimhood. I'm here to tell you about transformation." The sunlight from her window illuminated her face, the fading mark from Ethan's slap still visible on her cheek. It was no longer a symbol of shame, but of survival, a mark of strength, not weakness. Her speech, which she released across several platforms at the same time, quickly resonated with millions. People didn't just see her as the victim of Ethan's cruelty. They saw her as a symbol of strength and hope. She didn't just speak about what had happened to her. She talked about the deeper, systemic issues that allowed it to happen. She spoke not just of her own pain, but of her vision for healing and change. When Ethan Hawke staged his hateful stunt, Aileen said, he thought he was writing a story of humiliation. But he forgot something crucial. He wasn't the author of this story. We all are. Every person in that room, every voice that rose in song, every hand that reached out in solidarity, we are all the authors of what happens next. Her words were powerful, and the world began to understand why Ethan had chosen her as his target. Aileen had spent her life building bridges between different communities. As a social worker in underprivileged neighborhoods, she organized food drives, created mentorship programs for at-risk youth, and worked to bring people together. Her kindness and trust in others were not weaknesses to be exploited, but strengths that had helped countless people. Yes, I trusted him, she acknowledged, her voice unwavering. Some might call that naive, but I would rather live in a world where trust is possible than survive in one where fear rules. Aileen wasn't going to pretend that trusting Ethan hadn't hurt, but she refused to believe that trust was something to be ashamed of. My mistake wasn't in trusting him, she continued. It was in staying silent when I saw the early signs of his prejudice, hoping that love could change him without accountability. Then, Aileen's speech shifted. It became not just a response to one man's cruelty, but a masterclass in how to turn personal pain into collective purpose. Aileen spoke about her vision for a new organization, the Trust Again Foundation, which would focus on social justice and practical support for victims of discrimination. We will take the $50 million Ethan Hawke spent on hatred, she said, and we will multiply its impact through community action. Every dollar he spent trying to break us will build something beautiful. Her words sparked an immediate response. Within hours of the video's release, pledges of support from corporate leaders poured in, and grassroots donations flooded in from regular people, sending $5 or $10 to show their solidarity. It wasn't just a statement of support, it was a movement in the making. Aileen's voice grew even stronger as she addressed the younger generation. To every young person who has ever been made to feel less than worthy because of their skin color, their background, or their beliefs, your existence is not a mistake. Your presence is not an intrusion. You are the future. We have been waiting for you. Aileen spoke from the heart, and her words resonated deeply with young people across the country and around the world. She paused for a moment and then addressed Ethan directly. And to Ethan Hawke, she said, I have this to say, thank you. Thank you for showing us exactly what we're fighting against. Thank you for uniting 20,000 people in a way that might have taken years otherwise. Thank you for reminding us that love without action is just sentiment, and that true change requires both courage and commitment. Aileen's words were powerful, but they were not about revenge. They were about using pain as fuel for progress. Her speech also shared personal stories from her childhood, of her grandmother who had worked as a domestic worker but made sure Aileen attended the best schools, and of neighbors who shared what little they had with her family. The slap that was meant to shame me, she said, touching her cheek, has become a wake-up call for thousands. The party that was meant to humiliate us has become the founding moment of a movement. The speech continued to inspire. It was aired on major news networks, quoted on social media, and shared across the globe. But perhaps its greatest impact was seen in the quiet conversations it sparked in homes, schools, and workplaces everywhere. People began reflecting on their own biases, realizing that real change starts with them. Aileen's voice, once meant to be silenced, had become a powerful call for transformation. The consequences for Ethan Hawke came swiftly. His empire, which he had built through years of exploitation and prejudice, began to crumble after his public display of hate. The first sign of trouble came in the form of a single email. 1 week after the incident, Morgan Stanley's board of directors sent a brief message terminating all investment relationships with Benjamin Enterprises. It didn't stop there. Within hours, a wave of corporations followed suit. The glass tower that had once symbolized Ethan's success now became a monument to his downfall. One by one, the companies that had been connected to him began to cut ties. Martha Chen, the CEO of Global Tech Solutions, led the charge. She didn't just stop her company's partnership with Ethan's firm, she went a step further, announcing that Global Tech Solutions would launch a $500 million initiative to fund minority-owned tech startups. The message was clear. Companies weren't just distancing themselves from Ethan because of his actions, they were taking active steps to dismantle the systems of racism he had helped build. The exodus continued. Major retailers pulled Benjamin-branded products from their shelves. Hotels that operated under his license rebranded overnight, and luxury car dealerships that sold his cars found themselves without suppliers. Ethan's personal wealth, once estimated at $8.2 billion, began to shrink. His stock prices plummeted and investors quickly pulled out. The algorithms that had once worked in his favor, helping him trade millions of dollars, now worked against him. Public outrage sent shockwaves through the stock market, causing his holdings to lose value faster than he could manage. But the most devastating blow came from within his own company. Aisha Martinez, the longtime CFO of Benjamin Enterprises, had been quietly documenting Ethan's discriminatory practices for years. She released a detailed report showing how Ethan had used his wealth and power to underpay minority employees, deny contracts to minority-owned businesses, and bury harassment complaints. The report was explosive, and soon government investigations began. The Department of Justice launched an inquiry, and the Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC, began to look into his financial dealings. The Internal Revenue Service, IRS, formed a special task force to investigate suspicious tax filings. The power and influence Ethan had once used to avoid accountability were no match for the public outrage, the whistleblowers within his company, and the growing call for justice. In the executive suites of Benjamin Enterprises, chaos erupted. Longtime executives, who had once been loyal to Ethan, scrambled to secure new positions at other companies. Each departure was accompanied by public statements of regret and promises to do better. Ethan's empire, which had been built on hate, was now being dismantled by the very forces of justice and compassion he had tried to destroy. Aileen Wuornos had not only found her voice, but she had also inspired a global movement for change. And as Ethan's world collapsed, it was clear that the world was ready to embrace the kind of transformation Aileen had envisioned. The Human Resources Department at Ethan Hawke's company was overwhelmed. A large number of employees, both current and former, had begun to speak out, and many of them felt safe doing so for the first time. They had witnessed unfair treatment, and now they were sharing their stories of discrimination. These complaints came from people who had suffered silently for years, but now they had the courage to stand up and be heard. Once, the company's legal team had been known as one of the most powerful and respected in corporate America, but now this team was falling apart. Emma Carmen, the head of legal affairs, who had been with the company for many years, resigned in a very public way. In her resignation letter, she wrote something that shocked the corporate world. "I can no longer defend the indefensible." Our legal expertise was used not to ensure justice, but to obstruct it. Emma had been part of the system for so long, but now she could no longer be a part of the wrongdoing. Meanwhile, Ethan Hawke, the owner and CEO of the company, tried to salvage his reputation. He arranged a press conference where he made a carefully prepared apology. Ethan thought that by making a public statement, he could fix the damage and show that he was sorry for his actions. However, his plan backfired spectacularly. During the press conference, former employee James Washington stood up and began recounting the years of discrimination he had faced while working at Benjamin Enterprises. James's testimony was shocking, and as he spoke, Ethan tried to leave the podium in haste. This moment was captured on camera and quickly went viral. The image of Ethan rushing away from the press conference as James continued to speak became a symbol of his downfall. People all over the country saw this as a clear sign that Ethan was not genuine in his apology, and it made his situation even worse. The world now saw him as someone who had no intention of taking responsibility for his actions. As more and more people came forward, Ethan's empire, once powerful and prestigious, began to crumble. His real estate holdings, which had been a point of pride for him, were now falling apart. Businesses that rented commercial spaces from his properties invoked morality clauses to break their leases. Residential buildings bearing the Benjamin name saw their property values drop, and owners started demanding that his name be removed from the buildings. People no longer wanted to be associated with him. In addition, Ethan's relationships with banks, which were essential to keeping his business alive, dried up almost overnight. His credit lines were frozen, and loans that had been taken out to secure his empire were called in. The financial systems that had once protected Ethan's wealth now worked against him, accelerating the collapse of his business. Investment banks that had competed for his business refused to take his calls, and the once strong network of financial support Ethan had built was no longer there. The most ironic twist of all came from the very technology Ethan had used to spread hatred. The sophisticated audiovisual system he had installed for his now infamous hate-filled party was being used to broadcast the collapse of his empire. Every time something bad happened to him, whether it was a corporate departure, a stock price drop, or a new legal filing, it was all shared on social media and news platforms. The very technology he had used to hurt others was now documenting and spreading news of his downfall. In response to the growing calls for justice, the corporate world, which had often been criticized for moving too slowly on social issues, acted quickly and united. Companies that had once fiercely competed against each other now worked together on initiatives to promote diversity and inclusion. They used their resources, many of which had once been tied to Benjamin Enterprises, to build a new future, one based on fairness and equality. The most poetic piece of justice, however, came from the $50 million building where Ethan had held his infamous party. This building was purchased by a consortium of minority-owned businesses. Together, they transformed it into a center dedicated to corporate responsibility and social justice. It became a think tank focused on promoting ethical business practices and teaching companies how to treat people with fairness and respect. Just 3 months after Ethan Hawke's spectacular fall from grace, his empire had been reduced to a fraction of its former size. More importantly, it had become a case study in corporate accountability. Ethan's story became a warning to other businesses. No amount of wealth could protect hatred from consequences. The corporate world had sent a clear message. Racism was not just morally wrong, it was also bad for business. This marked a new era in corporate responsibility, one that would influence business practices for generations to come. As Martha Chen had said in her press conference, the true measure of corporate success is not just in profits, but in purpose. In boardrooms across the country, that message was being heard. Companies began choosing purpose over profit, and the business world started to change. 6 months after the infamous hate party, the case of Ethan Hawke came to court. The case was historic and would forever change how discrimination and corporate responsibility were handled in the legal world. On this day, the mahogany panel courtroom of the Federal District Court fell silent as Judge Maria Carmen took her seat. It was the day of the trial, and the case, known as the People versus Ethan Hawke, was about to begin. This case was extraordinary not just because of its high profile, but also because of the incredible teamwork between government prosecutors, civil rights lawyers, and whistleblowers from within Ethan's own company. The legal team that came together to bring Ethan to justice was impressive. It was led by Marcus Thompson, a renowned civil rights attorney, and Ayesha Khan, a former U.S. attorney who was known for her skills in court. The prosecution's opening statement was simple, but it carried immense power. "Your Honor," said Marcus Thompson, "this is not just about one party, one slap, or one man's hatred. This is about a systematic campaign of discrimination that spans decades, corrupts multiple industries, and has harmed thousands of lives." The prosecution presented 5 major parts to their case. The first part focused on the infamous party. High-definition footage showed how Ethan had planned his hateful speech with great care. Audio experts testified that the sophisticated sound system he had installed was designed to maximize the impact of his hateful speech. Event planners revealed how every detail of the party had been orchestrated to cause the maximum humiliation to those involved. The second part of the case focused on Ethan's business practices. Aisha Martinez, the company's former CFO, presented years of internal documents showing how Ethan had intentionally created a system that discriminated against minority workers. Spreadsheets revealed large salary disparities, and emails showed how Ethan had deliberately worked to prevent minority workers from advancing in the company. Internal memos even outlined strategies that aimed to avoid complying with equal opportunity laws. The third part of the case focused on the personal stories of the people who had been affected by Ethan's actions. For 5 days straight, former employees took the stand and shared their experiences. Security guards talked about how they had been ordered to follow Black customers around the stores. Qualified candidates told stories about being passed over for promotions because of their race. Each story built upon the last, creating a powerful image of systemic oppression. The fourth part of the case examined the broader economic impact of Ethan's discrimination. Economists presented studies showing how his actions had harmed entire communities. Property values in minority neighborhoods where he owned real estate had been artificially suppressed. Small businesses had struggled because of his predatory lending practices. The final part of the case was the most powerful. Nia Davis took the stand. Nia was a former employee who had been deeply affected by the party and the months leading up to it. She shared how she had noticed subtle signs of discrimination but had dismissed them. She described the small comments and actions that had made her uncomfortable and how, in the end, she realized she was being set up for public humiliation. Ethan's defense team, once one of the most respected in the country, found themselves overwhelmed. They tried to argue that the party had a misunderstanding, but their attempts crumbled under cross-examination. Their expert witnesses were discredited by their own past statements, and their character witnesses withdrew one by one as more evidence of wrongdoing emerged. The turning point in the trial came when Ethan himself took the stand. Under cross-examination by Aisha Khan, his calm facade began to crack. What began as smooth denials quickly turned into angry outbursts. When Patel presented emails Ethan had written mocking civil rights legislation, Ethan lost his composure entirely. "Yes, I did it," he shouted, "and I'd do it again. This country was better before." The judge had to cut him off, but the damage was done. His true nature was exposed in the courtroom, just as it had been during the party. Judge Carmen Morales' final ruling was historic. Ethan was found guilty on all charges, including multiple violations of civil rights laws, systematic discrimination in employment and housing, financial fraud, and more. The penalties were just as groundbreaking: $2.1 billion in compensatory damages, $5 billion in punitive damages, and mandatory divestment from all businesses with government contracts. He was banned for life from serving as an officer in any public company. In addition, Ethan was required to fund a civil rights history center, establish scholarships for minority students, and support various anti-discrimination programs. The courtroom erupted in applause, and the decision was hailed as a victory for justice. Outside the courtroom, thousands of people celebrated in the streets, their voices filled with joy and relief. It was a moment of true transformation, a moment that showed the power of justice when it is served properly. The impact of the case was felt across the country. Legal scholars noted that it set numerous important precedents. It expanded the definition of hate crimes to include premeditated public humiliation, established new standards for corporate liability in discrimination cases, and demonstrated the power of digital evidence in legal proceedings. The case would be studied in law schools for generations. 1 year after the infamous hate party, the site where it had taken place had undergone a complete transformation. The building was no longer a symbol of hate, but a beacon of hope. It was renamed the Phoenix Foundation, and Dr. Celeste Harper, who had been at the party, was chosen to lead it. Under her leadership, the foundation became a symbol of redemption. The Phoenix Foundation focused on 5 major initiatives. The first was the Rise Up Scholarship Program, which funded college education for students from underrepresented communities. The second was a coding academy designed to teach young people valuable technical skills and open doors to well-paying jobs. The third initiative supported small businesses owned by minorities, providing them with grants and business advice. The fourth program was focused on financial literacy, helping people learn how to budget, save, and plan for their future. Finally, the foundation sponsored programs to help people change their prejudiced views and foster tolerance. Ethan Hawke's attempt to spread hate and division had ultimately led to the creation of something far greater, a place where people could learn to work together for a better, more just society. The Phoenix Foundation showed that even the darkest moments could lead to a new beginning when people joined forces for a common purpose. The Phoenix Foundation became a powerful symbol of change, helping many people heal from the hurt caused by discrimination. The foundation created many programs to support people who had faced unfair treatment, and its impact was felt far and wide. It all started with one person's terrible actions, but by the end, it became a movement of hope, love, and justice. One of the foundation's key initiatives was teaching people how to manage money and build wealth, especially for people who had not had these opportunities in the past. These courses didn't just cover basic money management. They went deeper, helping people learn how to build generational wealth. This meant not just saving money for themselves, but setting up a foundation for future generations to be financially strong. The foundation wanted to give people the tools to succeed, no matter where they came from. The second important part of the foundation's work was to celebrate and preserve culture. They turned Ethan's old private suite, which he once used for his own personal space, into a beautiful gallery. This gallery featured rotating exhibitions of African American art, history, and culture. People from all over came to see the exhibits, and the foundation also hosted cultural festivals. These festivals were a big hit, drawing thousands of people every month. The events turned the space into a vibrant place where diversity was celebrated and everyone felt welcomed. It became a hub for learning, understanding, and enjoying the rich history of African American culture. The third area of focus was legal support. The foundation set up a team of civil rights attorneys who offered free legal services to people who were victims of discrimination. These lawyers helped hundreds of people fight for their rights, setting legal precedents that would protect minorities for many years to come. The foundation wasn't just interested in helping people win cases. They wanted to change the system, so discrimination would be less likely to happen in the future. The most powerful program, however, was the Community Healing Program, which was led by Dr. Valerie Stone, a trauma specialist. This program offered counseling, support groups, and workshops designed to help people process and heal from their experiences with racism. The foundation recognized that discrimination didn't just hurt people physically or economically, it also caused deep emotional scars. Through Dr. Thompson's program, many individuals were able to confront the trauma they had experienced and start the process of healing. The foundation's work didn't just affect individuals, it also changed entire communities. Local businesses, inspired by the foundation's example, began implementing new diversity initiatives. Schools started teaching more inclusive history. Even city planning was affected, with new projects focused on creating fairer, more equitable development in areas that had been ignored in the past. The foundation's impact on the community was undeniable. One of the most successful programs was the Unity Bridge Initiative. This program paired people from different racial and cultural backgrounds for monthly dinner discussions. These conversations were held in the same space where Ethan had once tried to create division. Now, instead of hatred and misunderstanding, the space was filled with understanding and friendship. People who had once been strangers now sat together and learned from each other's experiences. This initiative helped bridge gaps between different communities, fostering unity where there had once been division. The foundation didn't just stay within the walls of the building. They also had a strong online presence. Their website and social media shared success stories, educational resources, and ways that people could get involved. The hashtag Phoenix Rising became a symbol of hope and transformation, inspiring many to join the cause. Young people in particular were drawn to the foundation's work. They started their own initiatives at school and in their neighborhoods, helping to spread the message of justice, equality, and unity. The foundation also created the Youth Leadership Academy. This program trained teenagers in skills like community organizing, public speaking, and social justice advocacy. Many of the teens who went through this academy went on to become leaders in their own communities, carrying the message of love, justice, and unity to new places. The building where the foundation was based had once been a place of fear and control. Ethan had installed a sophisticated security system to intimidate others, but now it was used to ensure the safety of community members. The high-tech audiovisual equipment that had once been used to make cruel reveals and displays of power was now used for educational presentations and cultural performances. 1 year after the party where Ethan had tried to humiliate everyone, the foundation hosted a different kind of gathering. It was called the Unity Celebration, and it brought together everyone who had been at the original party, as well as thousands of people who had joined the movement since then. During this celebration, Nia Davis, one of the key figures in the foundation's work, unveiled a new installation in the lobby. It was a wall of mirrors surrounded by the words, "Reflection brings resolution," written in several languages. Nia explained that when Ethan had wanted people to see themselves through his eyes, he hadn't realized that they would end up seeing their true strength. The wall of mirrors symbolized how people could reflect on their own experiences and find the resolution they needed to move forward. The foundation's work was so impactful that other cities around the country began reaching out to ask for advice on how to set up similar programs. The model that the Phoenix Foundation had created, combining education, economic empowerment, cultural celebration, legal advocacy, and community healing, became something other cities wanted to replicate. The movement had begun to spread, and the foundation was leading the way. As the foundation grew, Sophia Ward, who had once been Ethan's fiancée, had her own moment of transformation. For weeks after the party, Sophia had isolated herself, feeling ashamed of her role in Ethan's cruel scheme. She had been part of the plan to humiliate others, and though she had tried to push aside her guilt, it weighed heavily on her heart. She felt like she had chosen to stay silent when she should have spoken up, and the media had labeled her as Ethan's accomplice. But Sophia knew she wasn't just a victim. She was someone who had made a choice to ignore what was happening around her. She realized that the only way to make things right was to take responsibility for her actions and work to undo the harm she had been part of. One day, out of the blue, Sophia received a message. It was from Nia Davis, asking if Sophia would be willing to meet. Sophia agreed, and they met at a small, quiet cafe. Nia had been waiting for her when Sophia arrived. There was a long silence between them as they sat across from each other. Finally, Sophia broke the silence, saying, "I'm so sorry." Nia's response was unexpected. "I know you are," she said, "but sorry isn't enough anymore." The two of them sat and talked for 4 hours. Nia listened to Sophia's apologies, but also challenged her to think deeper about why she had made the choices she had. Sophia admitted that growing up, she had been taught that success meant conforming to certain expectations. It meant going along with the system and not questioning the way things were. She had been afraid that speaking up would risk her own position in society. But Nia reminded her that Sophia had spoken up when it mattered most. On the stage at Ethan's party, Sophia had walked away from the plan. That moment was important too. Nia then made an unexpected proposal. She told Sophia that the foundation was starting a new initiative called Breaking the Cycle, which would help people recognize and confront their own biases. They needed someone who understood both sides of the divide, someone who had lived with privilege but had chosen to step away from it. Nia believed Sophia's story could inspire others to understand that it's never too late to make a different choice. Sophia took the challenge and began her journey of change. She started by taking courses on diversity and inclusion and attended community meetings at the foundation. She listened to the stories of people who had experienced discrimination and began to speak out. Sophia's first public speaking engagement was terrifying. She stood before a room full of corporate executives and shared her story. She admitted that she had been a symbol of the privilege that silence could buy. But now she understood that the cost of that silence was much higher than she had ever realized. Sophia's testimony was powerful because she spoke from her own experience. She understood the excuses people make to ignore discrimination. She explained how small compromises could lead to larger moral failures. But she also showed her audience that there was a way forward. She had chosen to confront her mistakes and work to fix them. Sophia's program, Breaking the Cycle, grew quickly. She developed workshops that helped people recognize their biases and take action to fight against them. She worked with businesses to identify and address discrimination in the workplace. But the most important work she did was through one-on-one mentoring, where she helped young professionals navigate the ethical challenges in their careers. She showed them that it was possible to succeed without compromising one's moral values. Sophia also made a difficult choice. She sold everything she had acquired while she was with Ethan: her expensive clothes, her luxury car, and her jewelry. She donated the money to the foundation's scholarship fund. The diamond ring that Ethan had given her, meant to mock Nia, was melted down and turned into hundreds of small phoenix pendants. Each pendant was given to the graduates of the Breaking the Cycle program as a reminder that transformation was always possible. Over time, Sophia and Nia became close friends. They often spoke together at events, sharing their story and showing others that it was never too late to make a choice for the better. Sophia's story was proof that redemption doesn't come just from asking for forgiveness. It comes from choosing to become part of the solution. On the anniversary of the party, Sophia returned to the transformed ballroom. This time, she wasn't there as Ethan's accomplice, but as the keynote speaker at a major conference on justice and equality. She spoke about the biggest legal victory in the history of the foundation: the settlement that would fund scholarships, legal aid, and resources for people who had been affected by discrimination. The settlement represented a decisive victory, not just in the courtroom, but in the fight against inequality. The money that Ethan had spent to sow hatred was now being used to build stronger communities. Scholarships were given to minority students to help them attend college. Small businesses in marginalized communities received grants to help them thrive. And legal support was provided to those who were being unfairly treated. The foundation's efforts weren't just about fixing the wrongs of the past. They were about making sure that the future would be different. As Nia Davis said in her speech at the ceremony 5 years later, "When we stand together in the face of hate, when we choose love over division, the future is ours to shape." Even Ethan's actions, which had been filled with so much hate, could not prevent the community from coming together. He had tried to tear people apart, but instead, he had united them. And in the end, love, justice, and hope proved far stronger than the hate that had tried to destroy everything. Thank you for watching. If you like this story and want to see more, please subscribe to our channel. That way you won't miss any new videos. Give us a thumbs up if you enjoyed it and share what you think in the comments. We love hearing your thoughts. Also, don't forget to check out the other videos on our channel. We'll see you in the next story.